I had a little extra coffee.
Yeah, good, good. I was gonna message you, see if we needed to give each other an alarm reminder this morning, huh?
Well, we could have gone later, but I suppose that there's always some place in the world where it's not a good time.
Our
Sure,
last
sure.
guest, Kintin, I was booting up the computer and I said, I'm just going to close my eyes for a second. And I woke up 10 minutes into the Zazenkai. So I made it this time. Are we on, Sekishi? All right, we'll get started in about a second. Let's just take a breath. Well, hello, everyone. And I would like to welcome you to this very special Zazenkai with Grace Schireson, a teacher who has had a tremendous influence in so many ways on Soto Zen Buddhism over the years. Before I forget, I'd also like Grace to dedicate tonight to our mutual friend, the late Kobutsu Malone, who Grace and Kobutsu, we don't have to go into the details, but did a tremendous service to Buddhism in the past decade or so. And he is passed on from this visible world, but I'd like to dedicate tonight to him. And I would also, before I introduce Grace, also like to make a special dedication to a couple of our members who couldn't be here tonight. We have two people in the medical professions who, because of the coronavirus, were planning to be here, but they have been called away. In one case, because their hospital is preparing for the onslaught of patients they're expecting in the next 2 weeks. So they're on high alert. He will be joining us. One of the wonderful things about our sittings is he can join sometime in the coming days when he gets a chance. But in the meantime, I told him he's doing Bodhisattva work. Grace
Where is
Schireson,
he? Where is he?
he's in London.
Hmm.
Yeah. And as I said, we have people here, Vietnam, 1 o'clock in the morning. In Crete, we were just hearing that where did he go? Oh, Nicholas, there you are in the corner. Nicholas is on lockdown for 1 month. He must stay in your house on the island of Crete, only allowed to go out for shopping and a bit of work. I think. Yes, you can't go out for work.
No, no, but we are in Cyprus actually.
All right, well, we're all with you, and at least you can have your friends here anytime. We're available to you, of course. Let me introduce these two books, if I may. This is Grace's latest, Naked in the Zendo, in which I was very disappointed to find out that in the book she doesn't actually get naked in the Zendo. I was looking for that part about it, but it's a wonderful memoir of her, I just got to say, crazy Zen career that has taken her from everywhere in Japan. And she was a student of one of the original students of Suzuki Roshi and then Mel Weitzman. Grace is one of our guests who has seen it all, a real, if we had a Mount Rushmore for Zen. And the other book we must mention is Zen Women, which Grace, I'm happy to tell you, we have a No Words book club, and this will be our selection for the No Words book club for the coming months. Going to be, you see several of our women priests here will be leading the discussions on that, but I'm going to insist all our members, if they can, join in, because this is not a book just about Zen women. This is a book about some Zen teachers who have been neglected and have tremendous teachings for all of us. And it's about overcoming barriers too. So it's not just about Zen women. You should have changed the title to Zen Everybody. But Grace, that's enough of me. I just want to say thank you. Would you say hello to everyone if you would?
Hello to everyone. And I just want to tell you that there was one occasion when I was naked in the Zendo, but nobody else was. Well, one of my students was there, a woman. And what happened was I went up we went up to check the Zendo before people came, and I had no cleaning cloths with me. So I took off my dress and I wiped down the altar. But the real meaning of Naked in the Zendo was about how it is we try to get good at things. And even when we come into the Zendo or study Zen, we want to be good at it. And how do we take the ego's clothing off when we're in the Zendo? Now, there was an occasion in the book of someone else whose pants fell off. And that is where the title came from. Now, since you wear a robe, it's hard for the robe to come off. But the pants, he was wearing sweatpants, and he went to bow 3 times. And this is what he told me after the occasion. And when he felt his pants were loose, he took a big inhalation. But we know in Zen, everything that goes in also goes out. So when he exhaled, his pants became very loose. And he looked down and his pants were at his ankles. And that did happen. And once it happened, it was like, this is, how could I ever top this? I don't have to be self-conscious in the Zendo because I can never make a mistake bigger than this one. Even if I pour boiling water on the abbot from time to time when I'm serving tea, there are many things I can do, but I will never top this man's nakedness Zendo. So then I taught my students, make your mistakes often and publicly, because what happens is our life is usually about trying to, as Suzuki Roshi said, look like good. We want to look like good. And so the ego is really tangled up with not making mistakes in front of other people. And that is a teaching where, you know, in Japan, when I was at Tofuguchi in Japan with Fukushima Roshi, there was I thought terrible use of the Kyosaku. That's their tradition, that's their business, but it felt very intrusive to me. But I came back from there saying, yes, I suppose the pain serves its own purpose to drive people deeper into meditation. But there's nothing more prevalent than our mental pain when something nips at our ego. We feel it. If somebody...
Grace, can I ask you to wait a few moments? We're going to sit for a bit, and then I will turn everything over to you. I just
well, you see, you don't have to turn it over. I just take over. So you just do what...
Yeah. I just want to say, I also had an incident of losing my pants here during a ceremony one time. And the thing about our Zendo is I actually have a film of it. So.
All right, anyway, we're ready for sitting.
We're going to sit about 25 minutes and I'll just ring the bell.
Okay.
All right, everyone where you are, just find your place. All right. Um, Before I introduce Grace, I just want to mention that afterwards we will have some questions, not only from the people here, but anyone watching at home. If you send me a private message, a PM through Treeleaf, I will be checking from time to time after Grace's talk. So without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to Reverend Schireson.
So you need to tell me about how much time I should spend talking.
Oh, 3 hours. So
Uh-huh.
as long as you'd like, but 20 minutes, 30 minutes, as long as you wish. 30 minutes?
Somewhere in there, we'll leave plenty of time for questions. So I had been just prior to our Zazen talking about the benefits of mistakes and how we try to avoid them. And we do in order to look like good, as Suzuki Roshi said, we want to look good. And the more we recognize our investment in that ego device, the more we can benefit from being human and going through our life and making mistakes. And we had a great example of that with me and Jundo when I just launched into my talk and he said, wait a minute, we're going to do Zazen first. It's like, yeah, right. What do I know? I'm sure he sent me instructions, which, you know, in the busyness of one's days, one doesn't read these instructions anymore or retain them anyway. So he was graceful and I was also graceful. So we're both grace. In any case, now I'd like to talk about our situation, which is kind of unprecedented for our lifetime. Although I think about my husband's mother and her fear of the Nazis. And she was in Los Angeles in the 40s, fearing the Nazis were going to take over the world. So now we have the fear of the virus taking over the world. So what do we do? And I have a chapter in my book that starts on page 31 for those of you who have the book. Otherwise, I will just share it with you. This is from Naked in the Zendo, and I already explained, I didn't pick the title. I actually wanted to have something very Zen-like. And I also didn't like the cover. I wanted to have some beautiful picture there, but Shambhala overrode me. And my son and my husband who do marketing research said, no, Mom, this is the right way to approach it. So I went along with it. But I really would have loved to have my gorgeous picture of Miao Zong laying outstretched spread eagle naked, which one of my friends has painted as the cover photo or even in the book. But that was shot down by the publishers. And this is a way we get along with the world, right? So in this chapter on page 31, torn panties on the electric meter, this is also an example of where the rubber meets the road, or one hand meets another, or one fist meets another. This is a story of my listening to the screams of the world, which we are doing right now. So that's why I would like to share this chapter. So in this chapter, which is called Torn Panties on the Electric Meter, was originally called Panties on the Electric Meter. But the publishers thought that might be a kind of like a trigger warning thing for people. So the rest of the book is kind of light. And so this is a story of a rape, an attempted rape. And they wanted me to change the title of the chapter to Every Decision Matters, or something very bland. And instead of that, I changed it from Panties on the Electric Meter to Torn Panties on the Electric Meter, because I felt that gave people some warning. You know, torn panties, something fragile, something intimate, something treated in a way to tear it, to hurt it. So I thought that would at least warn them. Anyway, in this situation, I was very young and new to Zen and ready to put it all on the line when I heard these screams in the back of the apartment building I was living in. So I'm just going to read for a few minutes, and and then I can talk about how we all need to find our response right now to these screams that we're hearing. And of course, there's a lot of fear. And there was for me in that moment too. So this happened when I was about 20 years old, and I lived in Berkeley, and I was an undergraduate at UC Berkeley. Besides doing Zen meditation in Berkeley, I was living a social experiment, riding a motorcycle, living on my own, and trying to be true to my ideals. As a result of my Zen training, I was beginning to consider the weight and import of each moment. I was faced with decisions about war, poverty, and racism. Through practicing Zen, I could see that my life was formed by my presence in each moment. I wondered about which efforts mattered. How would I know what mattered? In the last year at UC Berkeley, it was 67 to 68, I was 21 and living in what was known to be a bit dangerous part of town with the presence of drug dealers and gangs. I lived with another woman in a 2-bedroom apartment with a yellow painted kitchen floor. As UC Berkeley students, I felt that we stood out. Cognizant of our surroundings, we're both careful about our comings and goings. And I didn't go out in the neighborhood after dark, but I did go to the Berkeley Zen Center on my motorcycle for meditation every morning. Daily group meditation and silent breakfast were affecting me. So this during the 60s, Sojin had the Berkeley group meeting in his home. As I followed my breath, I was becoming aware of the meaning in each breath and in each moment, and the choice I had to be fully present in each moment. I was particularly affected by Suzuki Roshi's question to me. If the Buddha didn't exist, what are you doing sitting here today? I came to understand that each moment mattered, that life was a series of momentary actions that both brought us to our present circumstances and formed the quality of our lives. One morning after meditation at the Zen Center, a woman my age described being raped in her apartment. Like me, she was not living in the best part of town. She shared that her concern during the rape was how to remain calm while it happened. She used considerable effort to not scream. I puzzled over what seemed to me to be her Zen approach to rape. Should she have fought back or screamed? I didn't know the context of the situation, or that I would soon need to find my own way in such a moment. One night, soon after, I was awakened by screams. It was a female voice, and the screams were chilling and terrifying, not unlike what we're hearing right now. I looked at the clock. It was 12:20 a.m., not so late. I listened for other sounds. Doors opening or closing, footsteps or shouting back. I was listening for the sounds of her rescue. Wouldn't someone else come for her screams? But I heard nothing. My mind expanded and I thought, this is my moment. This is the meaning of Zen. How do we connect to a moment and realize our true nature right now? I wanted to stay in bed, but the urgency, the screams, and the fact of Zen wouldn't let me. I struggled for a moment with the realization and my doubts. Was there really such a thing as facing truth, as meeting this moment? My connection to Zen and the expansion of my mind in the crisis demanded that I had to know. I got up. I turned on my bedroom light. She was still screaming. I threw on a dress over my bedclothes and put on shoes, and she was still screaming. I went to my kitchen, turned on a light, and took a small serrated knife from the drawer. As I gripped the wooden handle tightly in my right hand, she was still screaming. It was not over yet. I went down the stairs and out the front door. I followed the screams to the back alley behind my building. As I approached, I heard the sound of running feet, but she was still screaming. When I saw her on the ground, she was still screaming. Her wild screams scared me, and she was curled up like a frightened animal. She screamed when I reached out to touch her, to pat her back, to tell her it was just me. I worked through my fear to find a calm voice to repeat, "It's just me. They're gone. You're safe." She kept screaming. I needed to repeat this message several times before she was able to look up and see me there. As she stood and moved away from the wall, I saw her panties on the electric meter, flowered cotton and lace, hanging on the metal and glass dial of the meter. I left them there. I didn't know if the men or boys would come back. I didn't know how much time we had. I put my arm over her back and led her around the corner of the building to my apartment. The door was still open. The light was still on. I locked the door behind us and we went upstairs to the kitchen with the yellow floor. In that moment, I loved that yellow floor for its cheeriness and innocence. She was still shaking, but she had stopped screaming. I dropped the small knife into the sink. As a student, I only had powdered milk, and I used it to make her warm milk, to which I added honey. I hoped it was soothing. She began to speak. She said there were 3 young men. She thought they were friendly. She cried about the lost underwear they had torn from her body. She cried about the humiliation, but she said they had not yet hurt her. They had run away. When she was a little calmer, we called her mother. Her mother was worried. Her daughter was late coming home. She told her mother she was safe. I spoke to her mother and got the home address. I called the cab. So in this situation, when nothing will do, what will you do? And of course, nowadays, as a 73-year-old, I'd probably try again to call 911. I don't know. Someone asked me, why didn't you call 911? And that brought to mind that maybe 2 years before this incident, a man had followed me as I was walking home from work and had tried to push me in an alley. And I ran away. And when I got into the apartment, which I just said, "Excuse me, this is where I live, bye-bye now." And I ran into somebody's house and called the police. They drove right by him. Not only did they drive right by the man, even though I said he's walking down the street and you can pick him up, but when they saw me and I related what had happened, the police officer said to me, then a 17-year-old girl, "He was lucky to get away from you. Why aren't you crying? You're not normal." So given those experiences, maybe that was why I didn't call 911. But now we don't have anyone to call. We're listening to the screams, particularly sensitive to the ones in Italy. Many of us have traveled there and loved it. And we're watching the suffering that they're enduring. And so we have a response. We need a response to that scream. We don't necessarily run right into it, particularly as a 73-year-old who might have some pre-existing conditions. We don't run into it. But what can we do? How do we help people? How do we reach out? What is it that's the world is calling for right now from us? And each of us needs to answer that. And I mentioned the essential koan that came from Hisamatsu, the Kyoto School of Philosophy. When nothing will do, what will you do? So this really puts us into the moment and takes us out of our automatic reactions, which are often formed by impulses that are unconscious to us. We don't have an answer. We don't have a way that we can help with this. It's part of the reason it seems so frightening. You know, usually when I read that chapter, I still get chills thinking about the sound of those screams. But now that the whole world is screaming, it's not so scary to me. There's a way we need to work with our fear and not react to our fear. And that's the very important part of what we can actually do to help people right now. We need to start with ourselves. When I was in Spain after a certain president's election in 2016, his name I will not say. When that happened, I have a daughter-in-law who's from Madrid, and I was in Madrid, and I took that opportunity to ask various people I met in my transactions there, how did you survive Franco? What did you do? What do you have to say to me about that? And they said, they come and go, and you need to survive this. And I would say the same thing is true right now. These disasters that we face as humans, for whatever reasons, imbalance in the ecosystem and various other greedy deeds, whatever we're experiencing, these events come and go, and we need to survive. Not only do we need to survive to continue our own life's work, but we need to survive so that we can be available to help other people. So I want to talk about that experience of what do we do when nothing will do? And this is on page 35 of my book, or 34. There were 2 frogs that dropped into a bucket of fresh milk. The level of milk was too low for them to reach the top of the pail. The sides of the pail were high, steep, and slippery, and they could not climb out no matter how hard they struggled. The frogs kicked and they swam in circles until they both became tired. The smart frog appraised their situation more quickly, and he said, we're done for. There is no way to get out of this bucket. I am tired and I give up. The smart frog soon drowned and died in the bucket. But the other frog was not smart enough to realize he could not get out of his situation. So he tried anyway. He kicked and he kicked and he kicked and he kicked because he couldn't figure out what else to do. Then something strange happened. The milk began to turn thicker around him. This made kicking even harder. It was harder to swim and to kick, but still the frog tried anyway. Finally, the milk turned thick enough so that the frog could stand on top of it instead of sinking in. The milk had turned into butter through all the frog's kicking, swimming, and churning. Standing on top of the butter, he jumped out. So none of us can anticipate how our effort will make a difference, but we need to be the dumb frogs. We need to be the frogs that listen to these screams and really work to be present by kicking, listening, kicking, trying to take care of ourselves, and waiting calmly to see how we are called in these times. So I'm going to stop now, as maybe you have some questions for me, and I can go on talking as needed.
There I am down there. All right. Oh, we want to hear more from you, Grace, but we'll take a little. I hope you give nice long answers. Nice long answers.
We'll get to the answers, and then there'll be more to say. Never is there a shortage of Grace talking.
Anyone here have a question? Please raise your hand. I certainly hope. All right, Koku.
Thank you very much for your talk and for being here. I really appreciate it. just from a friend in the Sangha bought me your book for Christmas, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was brilliant. Just really nice to hear about your life in Zen and all these stories that lead into practice. And just thinking about that chapter now, what struck me was when you were hearing her scream and sort of waiting to hear a rescuer. And I just got the feeling of probably everyone else was in their apartment waiting for the rescuer. And it just struck me as how, as humans, we tend to react a lot when something's happening. We sit around waiting for somebody to sort it out. And although in Zen, obviously, we don't want to rush into things blindly, but it does seem to me an important thing you're saying there that I would emphasize and agree with. Well, I'm wondering if this is what you're saying, is in Zen, we don't sit and wait for that rescuer to come, because we sort of see, we're the hands and eyes of Canon. If we're not the rescuer, who is? It's like, well, if we're not going to do it, then, and it's difficult in this situation because most of us don't have the expertise or knowledge to know. But like you say, I think it is really important to see that, probably we have to just see how we're called to act in this. But yeah, I guess I just want you to talk a bit more about that, whether you're saying, about whether we wait for rescuers or whether we just say, I'm going to do something. So anyway, that is my kind of very waffly question.
Yes, thank you very much, Koku-san. So I think this is such an individual thing. And I have, since childhood, had an excess of, I've got to fix this. So my reaction, having studied Zen and saying, wait a minute, what is this moment I'm in right now? But I also remember when I was a 5-year-old, my mother left me in the car. She was taking me to kindergarten. And she ran back into the house to get something. And the car door was open, and either I was waiting to get in the car or I jumped out of the car and I started pressing on the car door to keep it from rolling down the driveway. That was me as a 5-year-old. So you can see I have a tendency, and we have to watch our tendencies. Anyway, the car was kind enough to throw me aside in the mud. And my mother was so horrified when she came out that she made me wear my muddy dress to kindergarten, which, of course, was a horrible punishment. But we have our tendencies, and we have to work on our tendencies. Wouldn't it have been wiser for me to make the call to 911 ahead of time? Wouldn't it have been wiser to stop at my neighbor's doors to get some reinforcement? So we have ourselves to contend with, and we have our tendencies. And now that I'm old, my tendency is not quite so strong to jump in the middle. I remember I was on a train with my younger son in Japan. And there was a man who was not mentally well, and he started harassing a young woman. But since I was with my son, who's 6'5" and was 21 at the time and strong, I just tapped him and I said, and it sort of indicated, go take care of that. And that's how I raised my sons. And he went over to the man who was sort of terrifying this young woman on a train car where nobody else got up. It was all the rest were Japanese people. Nobody else got up. They just looked away. And he just went up as a 6'5" guy and shook his finger at him like this. And the guy went and looked up at him. And he started laughing and then relating to my son. So how do we use both the moment and skillful means and understand this is a tendency? There's a tendency to rush in and take care of things. And as we mature, maybe we understand the other kinds of resources we need and are wiser in the situation. And when we're waiting for the rescuer, we need to think, what are my resources right now? what are my resources right now? Not just how do I fix this? So that would be my tendency. And I would advise that everybody look at their tendencies as well and their reactions.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I have a, thank you, Koku. I have a question from Anne at home. It's pretty simple. She says, many people are scared of things that, especially this, cannot be seen. You don't know where it is, but many people are just out of their minds scared. What do we do?
Yes. What do we do when nothing will do? We're scared. We're absolutely scared. I'm scared. I haven't been sleeping as well. I notice it has an effect on my stomach as well. So I'm definitely afraid because of what you mentioned, that we can't see it and we don't know where it's coming from. We know a tsunami is coming. We just don't know from where. So this is a time when at least we can try not to wear ourselves down with worry, fear, and anxiety. So it's appropriate, I think, to be frightened. And then again, the question is, so what do we do? And each person has different requirements. I started getting ahead of the curve on this 2 or 3 weeks ago. Now you can't buy a thermometer, for example, but I did buy the ones that you can touch your forehead with so I can track myself. My husband and I'm 73, he's 74, and he has asthma. So we're at risk. And so we decided, as I continue shopping from Instacart and Amazon, to stay home. And not only to stay home, but we share a house with my son, my daughter-in-law, and my 3 grandchildren, who are all out of school now. One came back from Boston where he was in college. And we will only meet with them outdoors with the appropriate distance. We don't share space anymore. We don't share food. We don't go out. We had to cancel our classes. But what we are doing is trying to survive this so we don't burden either our family or other places like the hospital. How do you take care of yourself and how do you take care of your fear right now so that you can remain well to be a resource later in a way that we don't yet know?
Ipo, did I see you had a question?
Yeah, Jindo. Thank you for coming on. For starters, I
Speak a little louder.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Jindo, you got me?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, there's something that and this is really in line with what you've spoken about. And it's not so much a question, maybe a comment, but I remember my first Zen teacher, and I spoke about this with Jindo before, used to say, and I've read about this in Robert Aitken's book too, that the highest teaching in Zen is an appropriate response. And I think I'll leave it at that and maybe let you take that, because your insight's far more valuable than mine. So there's my statement. Huh?
Yeah, well, I don't know about the last judgment that my insight is more valuable than yours, but I happen to be here right now, so I'll say something. Yeah, it's one of my favorite sayings. It's a Yunman quote when someone asked him, what is the teaching of the Buddha's entire lifetime? And he said, either he said an appropriate response, or the other translation is dancing in tune with the times, which is a more poetic and engaged way of saying it. So yeah, I think the way we know an appropriate response is to know our habitual response. And what would our habitual response be? Put up our head in the sand, to think only of oneself, or like me, to rush towards danger. We need to know our habitual response and feel, where does that arise in the body? And then take the breaths we need to take to be guided. So one story I will have about this, when I was in Japan and at Tofukuji Temple, they wore these wonderful, I'm a great lover of clothing. So they wore these wonderful robes, indigo robes, very heavy. they wore them in the winter retreats. And I thought, I should get one of those. This is missing from my wardrobe. So I got the name of the shop where the Rinzai monks at Tofukuji bought their robes. And I went there, and it was terribly expensive. And I had to think, whoa, I'm not sure if I'm ready for this. And that was, pulling back from my shopping mode. I am known as the shopping Roshi. In any case, I went outside of that store and I started to walk away. And what I do is feel my feet. And then I know I'm in my whole body. So I felt my feet. And they said, go back and buy the robe. So I turned around and went back and bought the robe. The wonderful thing about that robe was that not only did I use it at Tassajara during the winter, but many of my friends who went used it. And I couldn't have said in that moment what use that robe would have been. But people who had it during those cold sits at Tassajara were very happy to have it. And so sometimes it's like the universe needs to guide us and we need to get out of the way to find the right response. So first of all, the shopping impulse, the clothing impulse, the acquisition impulse needed to go aside, and then just ask in a certain way. I would stand and ask, what's the right thing here? Because I'm only here in Japan for a certain amount of time. I'm probably not going to find time to come back to this shop. What's the right response? And I was told, go back and buy the robe. So that takes some practice. And the more we practice, putting us, first of all, knowing our tendencies, being aware of them coursing through our body, this is my impulse, and then letting that go and saying, what else is there to guide me? This is a very important practice. What else is there to guide me? And I have learned through my own practice, when I put myself off to the side, or at least my impulse is off to the side, I often tap into something that I can't foresee. For example, getting the robe and how many people benefited from it. So I do that often. And that's my relationship to an appropriate response, which is learning to let the wisdom circulate, not only in the body, mind, but from the entire universe. What needs to be done here? And so that's how I find my way to an appropriate response.
Thank you, Grace.
Okay. I have a question from Tokan in New Zealand. I think it's also the middle of the night there. I don't know if they're earlier or later, I forget, but so he's sitting with us from home, and he says, good morning, Sangha, and welcome to Reverend Grace. Thank you for talking about trauma. I manage a prison health team and do my best to support the team balance in their minds and professional ethics. The weight of the trauma experienced by the inmates against the weight of the trauma they have caused. I wonder if you have any guidance for me in helping them, I guess the prisoners, or the team too, and myself, I guess, protect I guess the team he's talking about. I wonder if you have any guidance for me in helping them and myself, I guess, protect ourselves from burnout.
Yes, I did work in a women's prison, and it's a very amazing experience, the level of trauma. As far as the team that I was working with, they were my own students. But the important thing was for them to feel like they could experience what they were experiencing, the fear, even of just going in the prison and being locked up in the prison and all that you have to go through to get there. There is this kind of vicarious traumatization that occurs not only from the fear of being in the prison, but from listening to trauma. We, as humans, share emotions. So there is a lot of understanding about how we're traumatized by other people's traumas. That needs to be talked about. It also needs to be, what else needs to be talked about is that we need to share when we're feeling these feelings of trauma, what it's bringing up for us, and how do we come together to let each other know it's not about my getting ahead of you. It's not about my being a better bodhisattva than you. I'm here to help. My friend Darlene Cohen said, we should have Post-its on our forehead that say, how can I help you? I'm a priest. How can I help you? And so we need to set up that, maybe model it within the group, and let people know, yes, you will experience burnout. Yes, you will be traumatized vicariously by these things. That's real. And what are you doing to take care of yourself, whether it's bubble baths or watching your favorite Netflix? How do you unhook yourself from things? Besides, I know you need to use your meditation and your chanting. I have a small chant I use when I'm in really difficult situations, and it's just turn toward the light. It's very simple. So people, you need to come together. And one of the things I emphasized when I taught in groups was, what are you using to take care of yourself? How do you deal with this? And sharing those resources and techniques among the group will help them. First, giving them permission, and second, giving them methods to deal with the trauma.
Sergashi?
Well, thank you for coming and talking to us. Something you just said, it brought to mind, I want to say that this was Pema Chodron, but I could be wrong. Somebody I've read in the last few years had this expression that this is real, but is it true? And you just talked about the realness of the things we experience. Like I feel like part of Zen practice is maybe having a bit of skepticism about the things that we think, and the trueness of them, and the way they do or do not map onto this great mystery. But the thing is, what arises is real. It's so real to us. So when a lot of people are feeling fear like they are right now, it's real. Like, don't push it away. It's for realsies.
Yeah, this shit just got real.
Shit just got real. So I don't know. I'm not sure exactly. I guess I don't have a question. Just that really resonated for me, the way you were talking about
Yeah,
that. Really,
right. So there's reality, and then there's our filter on reality, right? So right now we can't quite tell, what's this illness going to look like. If it's going to look like Italy, oops, it's terrible. So how are we taking that in with our filters? Some people are denying it, saying, well, I'm young, I can go out and party. Some people like myself are saying, I'm staying home, I'm not going anywhere. And we have to look at our filters. Yes, it's real. And how much are we bringing to the picture? Adding fear, oh, I knew something terrible was going to happen, the kind of anxious response. For me, it's about, when I get fearful like this, it's like, what can I control? What groceries can I get in the house? And that's kind of endless, because every time I think of something like, oh yeah, I just bought some laundry detergent to last me. Now, what about my dishwasher soap? So it's just it snowballs. And that's what I have to realize, is I can't control this, but I can try to be calm and make good decisions. So yes, it's real, and the fear is real. And even anxiety and the tendency to react emotionally with negative emotions is also real. So this is where our practice really comes in that we know when we have certain feelings in our body or certain thoughts, we're stoking that fire. That's our tendency to react. So that's what we need to look for in terms of, yes, it's real. Now what do I do?
We have someone writing from home who asked to be anonymous, and for me to, it's a long story, but to summarize it, she also survived an assault, not unlike what you described, and there was someone there who also helped her, and she just wanted to say thank you. Never had a chance to say thank you, but she wanted to because someone helped her in a similar way, but that's not her question. Her question is, she says she's not a prayer, but these days, for some reason, they to pray to, and she.
You're cutting out on me right now, so let's see what we can do about that.
She says she doesn't know who to pray to. She's not a prayer, but if she was to pray, who would you suggest? Who do you pray to? Who should she pray to?
Well, in my book, I described from very early on that I had a relationship to the great beyond, which of course was taught to me in Sunday school as God. And now I experience it as a kind of awareness that permeates the universe. And I also studied with some Tibetans, and they encouraged me to picture, Punlop Rinpoche encouraged me to picture or find one of the bodhisattvas, particularly a female that I could relate to, as a supporter of me. So in my book, Zen Women, I list a lot of actual women who one could think of, that's kind of like my life. She's doing things, she's practicing the way I am. And that's one way of saying, guide me. When I was writing the book, which took about 10 years, including all the research and all the starts and stops, I kept scrolls that I had bought in Japan of Rengetsu. And I surrounded myself with her energy. So there could be someone, a grandmother, an aunt, someone who you know cares, loves you, or someone that you admire, that you can tap into their energy as a support.
All right. Someone at home? Someone here, I mean. Mateus.
I would like to ask, it's a problem from me, how to deal with the anger when we face injustice.
Boy, I know that one. There are two competing, what do they call them, clashes for me, anger and greed. So sometimes I'll go shopping instead of getting angry, but most of the time I'll just get angry. So what we have to recognize about anger is, what does it feel like in the body? What does anger feel like in the body for you? And try to pay attention to when that anger is arising, because it does tend to burn you out a little. And right now you need all you've got to survive and to take care of others. So first identify what your anger feels like in the body and what it sounds like when you say it out loud. And so, you know, anger is, and especially our impulses, are a lot like taking a match and throwing it into kerosene. Once it gets going, it's very hard to put it out. So we need to catch it at the earliest phases. And the earliest phases will be, like for me, maybe my face gets warm or my hands get warm, or I start repeating, they did this and they did that, and I'll catch myself thinking that way. And then I have to bring my attention to my breath. So we need to first identify in the body, where are these impulses? What do they feel like when they arise? The helpful ones, which are about becoming calm, those are also impulses, they're positive impulses. we can work to develop those. And that means finding your words, your phrases, your actions. You know, Fukushima Roshi used to say, you can make ramen in 3 minutes. You can do 3 minutes zazen to calm yourself down. But first you have to recognize in your own body what it feels like when these impulses are arising. And then there are solutions, and you can work and see which is the best one for you.
Thank you very much.
Another question from the gallery. Geika.
This is just something that I wanted to.
Can't hear you, Geika.
Can you hear me now? Oh no. Oh, hold on, let me.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Just something I want to put out there concerning elderly people being unable to go out and get what they need because they're afraid to leave their homes. If you have elderly family or friends who can't leave or are afraid to leave, try and help them with Amazon yourself if there's something they need, or any other online ordering service. A lot of elderly people don't know how to use these things. My own grandmother expressed frustration because she doesn't know how to use these things, and you know, and I do, and I'll help her. But you know, a lot of people don't, and they feel trapped and they feel stuck and helpless and scared. And one thing we can do to alleviate that fear is, if you know someone's struggling, reach out, try to help them get the things that they need. And I just want to put that out there because I experienced my own fear and stress yesterday when I tried to buy some dog food. They were almost completely out. And I that was when it hit me like, oh God, this is real. This is something I need. I'm out of dog food. I can't find it. So I was very angry, and I went home, and that's when the panic started. It's been days where I've been very calm and I've been okay with all this. And suddenly it hit me, oh, it's affecting my life now. And so in any way we can help anybody else who needs something, please try to do so. That's
Thank
all
you.
I have to say.
Thank you. And I agree with that. And as an elderly 73-year-old, I am isolated in my home, and I have been ordering from Amazon and Instacart. And it was really stressful for me yesterday when I was on with Instacart. They say, we don't have that. We don't have that. We don't have that. And the question is whether they'll restock or not. So this is a real fear. And the important thing, I think, for the young people who are going to help others is that they recognize they may be carrying it with no symptoms. So as you mentioned, you know, call people on the phone or try to find ways, like I can order from Amazon and have it delivered elsewhere. So it's important for the younger people, if they're going to help, to understand, from what I've learned about Italy, that most of the people who are getting sick, and particularly the old people that are hit so hard, they're getting it from their families. So that you don't share food and that you keep your distance. So I live in a household of 3 generations. My son and daughter-in-law are upstairs with their 3 children who are back from college and high school. And everybody's home, and the kids are out seeing their friends. And my daughter is a physician, so she's at Stanford. And I'm not letting them come into my apartment. First, I was spraying their shoes with alcohol and spraying their hands with alcohol when they came in, and they were good with that. But I said, you know what? We'll meet outside. We'll meet outside where we can really keep distance, and I'm not going in their house and they're not coming in mine. And so there are ways that we have to really be careful in how we help people, and families especially.
I just want to note, Onkai, we just saw you sneeze into your elbow. We all appreciate it. Everybody bow to Onkai. Very nice. I have a question that, okay, connection's a little unstable. I apologize.
It might be me too.
I I lived through the tsunami in Fukushima here and also some hurricanes in Florida where the power went out for weeks and we had nothing. And I saw it actually bring out, in many ways, the best in people too. So I'm not in the States right now. I wonder if you are seeing that and if you actually think these events will have a good effect on people, Grace.
I hope so. And I think it will have the effect of understanding that as a herd of humans, we need to take care of each other. Otherwise, we're a petri dish for the people who are homeless, for the people who don't have medical resources. We're all going to be exposed and they don't have choices about isolating themselves. So, or maybe even staying home from work. So we haven't yet been, we think we're about 5 days away from the Italy situation. People are staying home. And for me, the biggest hardship was giving up my Pilates classes. That was tough, but I found one online. People are staying home. And I'm reading on Facebook that people were at the scary, we're watching the tsunami approach and we're at the scared place. And some people are saying, remember to take care of your elderly and call them and make sure they have everything they need. But I haven't had much contact outside of Facebook with how people are dealing with this. And what I'm picking up on now in Facebook is we're still in the scared phase with some people saying, remember, there are others. But I do think it will change as we're inundated. And I hope it changes in a positive way, but I don't know for sure. I'm in a very liberal community in Palo Alto. I live actually on Stanford campus, and it's kind of nice. The students have all been sent home, so there's plenty of room to walk without seeing anyone. And right now I can still do that.
Another question from anyone here? Do you had a question? Yes. Do you?
I live in the country, and in our neighborhood, we're absolutely surrounded by signs advocating a certain candidacy of a certain person. And we are on a social media called Nextdoor. And I have observed that many of my neighbors say things on Facebook or Twitter that terrifies me. And on Nextdoor, they say things that are absolutely heartwarming. And it's like they're saying it to the same people. If there's an 80-year-old in the neighborhood, it doesn't matter that she's not of their political party. They help her. And it is phenomenal to see that happening.
So
That's
you're
my comment.
You're a little ahead of me, Do-you? Thank you. You're a little ahead of me in what you're seeing. They're just waking up here on Stanford campus. I was teaching a group on the Stanford University Women's Club. And 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I said, I'm not sure we should be meeting because most of us are older. And they said, oh, we're still going to bridge and this, that, and the other. Now the Stanford University Women's Club has canceled all events. So you're a little ahead in terms of what you're seeing. I think people are finally getting the gist of it. We're a little protected. And it will be a world that we are not prepared for. And it will be interesting to see when nothing will do. What will people do to help each other and how that will unfold for us? I don't know yet in my neighborhood. I haven't seen much yet, and I'm not going out.
I'm seeing too the young people, surprisingly, quite a lot of young people, I find it surprising, are on Nextdoor, where most of us are 70 or older, are popping up and leaving messages saying, if you need anything brought to your house, here I am. It is phenomenal.
Yeah, great. I'm glad to see it. I have to check in with my Nextdoor. We have one here too, Nextdoor at Stanford, but I haven't actually read the messages for a while. I'm more tuned into the global social media on Facebook. So it's interesting. I bet you that it's on my Facebook already. I mean, on my Nextdoor.
We are getting towards the end. I have a question at home from Anne about your Zen Women's book. She says she knows the situation of women in Asia is a little different. She's talking about in the West, especially America. Do you think that the situation for women in Zen Buddhism is about as good as you could hope for? Did you hear the question?
Yes, is the situation for women in Zen Buddhism as good as I would like it to be? Not yet. So I would say 50% or more of the teachers are women, and that is wonderful. But as far as the big temples go, pretty much we have to start our own temple. It's not like we inherit one that's ongoing and established. Most of the big temples are led by men. Of course, all of that is changing now since we're all going online. But for example, San Francisco Zen Center would have had men, successors to Suzuki Roshi, except they formed a committee to choose the abbot. And then they were able to, through the committee, bring in some women. So that's the part that hasn't yet quite changed, that most men are transmitting or giving their temple when they retire to other men. So it's changing. And I think one of the places where it's the best is in Taiwan. The women there are very strong. And I write about this in my book. And they're social workers and they're teachers, the nuns. And they're the ones who are protesting the old Buddhist rules, the 8 special rules for women, you know, that they can never correct a monk, that they are always junior to the most junior monk, no matter how senior they are. So all of these things are being protested by the women in Taiwan, and they actually outnumber the monks there. And through some of the accidents of history, for example, in Taiwan, when they left mainland China, the nuns came too, but the nuns had not been well educated. And in order to restart Buddhism in Taiwan, they educated those women and they brought them in. Now, also this happened in Korea when the Japanese had invaded Korea and taken over the Zen temples. When they left, there weren't enough monks there weren't enough male priests to take over the temples. So they needed to educate and promote the women. And so the women are very successful in certain areas. And some of this is by accidents of history. But I don't think, although we've made a lot of progress in the West, and particularly in celebrating the female ancestors now, an interesting point that when I proposed that Soto Zen Buddhists acknowledge the female lineage, I was told you can call it, the conclusion was you can call it the women's ancestor document, but since our teachers gave us this male lineage, we can't call what you're doing a lineage. So that was a kind of diminishment, but we took it because at least we have a women ancestor document now on the SCBA website, and also one that I gave out when I ordained or transmitted somebody from Jukai all the way through Dharma transmission. So we're working on it in various ways. And one of the things that I've noticed about Buddhists and Zen people too, is that they don't like conflict. Unfortunately, I'm at the higher end of being able to tolerate conflict. So I do bring things up, and people don't want to rock the boat at like changing, applying a word like lineage to women ancestors. So there's things that are happening and we're in process. Now, the thing that I've been most involved with of late is talking to Sanghas, talking to women in Sanghas who've been involved or been approached by their teacher for sexual favors. And that's still very much going on. And I think until we actually have laws in all the states, we think we only have 13 states that have laws about this kind of thing. Women go into a situation and they have an impulse, often, some women do, to be agreeable and to let the teacher have his way at times when maybe they shouldn't. So there's the education of women about this problem, and mostly the education of sanghas to understand when they feel like this may be going on, when they're getting clues to help stop this kind of behavior. Because I think this is a way women are suffering a lot still in the West, in that they become the teacher's pet versus really working on deeper issues. So we have to be really careful with that. So these are some of the ways I see we're still working on things in the West for women.
Let me just mention that when there were those fortunately few but terrible scandals in mostly American Buddhism, Grace was one of the people who went in, brought a light, and got justice for victims, brought healing to these groups, and you're only to be commended for your work. There might not be a Zen Buddhism if it wasn't for some of the work you did.
Thank you. I don't think it's as few as you think, because I'm still working on it. I've talked to more than 100 women in this situation, many of them from the early, serial predators, but it's still going on. In fact, I was just involved with 2 more cases, one in the Tibetan tradition, one in the Zen tradition. Actually, in the Zen tradition, the Sangha retired the teacher and brought in a full investigation. In the Tibetan tradition right now, we're going to have to go to the press with this because the Sangha will not participate in any kind of investigation. So it's still quite ongoing. And this is about Sangha responsibility, because otherwise we kind of turn into a cult. There's too many things. In Zen Buddhism, the meditation in the traditional monastic, there's the meditation, there's the chanting, there's lack of sleep, there's the costumes, the shared costumes that we have. All of these things have an effect of making a group start to become cult-like. And in a cult, they celebrate the teacher to an excessive degree and won't find fault. And I've written some on this for Psychoanalytic Journal, that some of this has to do with the tendency of people who are in a group together to absorb the social conditioning in a way that makes it like a cult. Another thing is that people who have dependent personalities start depending on the teacher in a particular way. So if the teacher doesn't have any faults, they're okay. But if the teacher does, they're not okay. So we have to understand this a lot better and keep working on it.
Well, speaking as a teacher with many faults and also one who is sleep deprived right now, I'm going to take a moment to just thank Grace, and then I'm going to bed.
Okay. Let me just say that we have the Shogaku Zen Institute online training for people, and especially now that we have not meeting together. If you go to shogakuzen.org, there are many classes that we're offering right now. We're offering one on group dynamics and how people get tangled up in groups. We will be offering one on eco-dharma, and you can get an MDiv from the Shogaku Zen Institute, so you could work in chaplaincy, but you can also just take courses, and we offer a lot of scholarships and financial support. So it's shogakuzen.org. Thank you very much.
I'm certainly going to have our priests look at this opportunity more closely. And I want to thank you again, Grace. And I want to ask everybody, please take care. Wash your hands often. Don't touch your face, and cover when you sneeze. Take care of people around your community who need help. And most importantly, don't panic and keep peace in your heart. All right. Be healthy, everyone. Grace, thank you.
Thank you for having me. Nice to see you
Say
all.
good night. Good night, everyone. Good morning.
Good night, Gracie. Good night.
Thank you, Grace. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.